Hello and welcome to episode 15 of Stucky's Travels. I'm on a solo mission as we finish Washington, D.C. over the next couple of episodes. And in the previous episode, I talked about things that were north of the National Mall area that you might want to visit as you come in from Gettysburg. So now we are going to move our way south to the National Mall area and cover the western part of the National Mall. It's about a 3.5 mile walk to cover everything in this picture. I think it would be, if you're in good shape, it would be best to actually walk this loop as opposed to trying to bring your own vehicle. If you bring your own vehicle, you need to start early in the day, and there's really only a few possible places to park. Another possibility would be the hop-on, hop-off bus or trolley tours. You are at their mercy as far as the schedule goes, and how long you spend at each spot, how busy the trolleys are. So if you're in good health, I would recommend walking this route. So your first stop can be a quick stop. It's the Einstein statue. You're allowed to climb on this statue. It's very large. It makes a great family picture. So just a quick little stop right across the street from the Vietnam Wall and Lincoln Memorial. So next, you'll come to the Vietnam Wall made out of granite. It was part of a contest, and a lot of people entered the contest to come up with a design. You can read all about it on Google if you're interested. But the name of every person who was killed in Vietnam or who's died afterwards as a result of their injuries that they incurred during Vietnam, his name is on the wall. If you know someone whose name is supposed to be on the wall, you can either look the name up online before you go, or there are large books on one of the ends, and you can look up the name of the person. It will tell you which panel of the wall the name is located on and how many lines down the name is. And then you can take a piece of paper and do a rubbing so that you can have that as something to take home as a memento. People are allowed to leave things at the wall, and so oftentimes you'll see notes or letters or flowers or wreaths, things like that. So the wall is highest in the center part, which is when the conflict started, and the names are on the wall chronologically as best they can for when the person passed away. So this name at the top left-hand corner was the first casualty that they're aware of from the conflict. There'll either be a diamond next to the name, a cross next to the name, a diamond with a cross in it, and so on, and those all signify different things. There's plenty of information if you want to learn more about that. The upper right-hand picture, I've zoomed in on a section of the wall to highlight Michael J. Blassie. His body was actually in the tomb of the unknown soldier. At the time, they didn't know who it was, but they did DNA testing and were able to positively identify who it was. The family decided that they wanted Michael to return to the family cemetery, and that portion of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldiers is now empty. So you can see that the wall is shorter in other sections. So on the far left and far right, the wall is shorter, and then it gains height as it goes. There are two statues that are also associated with this memorial. One dedicated to the nurses who were very important in helping with the casualties that there were during the war. And the other one is three soldiers depicting the clothing that they would have been wearing in conflict. Next stop is the Lincoln Memorial. So it's beautiful. I don't know whether I like it better during the day or at night. It's certainly beautiful at night. The picture in the upper left is standing on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial looking over the reflecting pool with the Washington Monument reflecting. So certainly beautiful views at night. Lincoln sitting in a chair inside the memorial. It's a very famous, it's on coins and on money, a very famous memorial for sure on the far west end of the National Mall area. Right next to that is the Korean War Memorial, oftentimes called the Forgotten War because it was kind of sandwiched between World War II and Vietnam, but there were over 50,000 deaths to Americans during Korea. So the stainless steel soldiers are dressed in the parkas, designating and showing that Korea had a lot of rain. And so they were always wearing parkas. And then the granite slabs along the ground are so that it shows kind of a reflection, which is to represent all of that water kind of sitting in the rice paddies. In the background, there's a black granite wall, which has over 2,000 pictures of real soldiers that are etched into the stone. They got the pictures from the National Archives, and there have been people who have actually found their picture on the wall. There isn't any key or anything where you can like look somebody up to see that they're on the wall. They were anonymous pictures of the people, but people have, found themselves or their loved ones. So freedom is not free. Certainly the case. A lot of people leave wreaths behind, thanking the veterans for their service. And it really is kind of a neat memorial aesthetically on how it looks, and pretty popular. So now we're moving out of the National Mall area and sort of down to the Tidal Basin area. We have the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial, and in one of his speeches he said, "Out of the mountain of despair, a stone of hope." So that's what this statue represents, that they took this piece of rock, pulled out part of it to carve his image, and so you'll see the stone with Martin Luther King Jr., but then also the stone behind that you walk through as the entryway. And when you're standing and looking through, you're looking across the Tidal Basin and seeing the Jefferson Memorial, which you can see to the far right of the screen. As you continue to walk around the Tidal Basin, you will come to the Franklin Delano Roosevelt Memorial. He had actually told his friend Felix Frankfurter, who was a Supreme Court justice, that he did not want a memorial. If there was to be a memorial to him, it should only be the size of his desk. So the original Roosevelt Memorial is actually the size of his desk and sits on the lawn of the National Archives, where you go to see the Constitution and Declaration of Independence. However, with a president that served into his fourth term, you certainly have to have something bigger than a desk to memorialize the contributions. So it's set up as an outdoor sort of museum type thing with stone that you walk from room to room. Again, it's open air, but you walk from room to room, and each of the rooms represents a different term of his office. And so then there's the statues of himself, his wife, and his dog Fala. And then you can see the Jefferson Memorial across the Tidal Basin. You can go on a walk around the Tidal Basin. There is a trail, and that will take you all the way to the other side to the Jefferson Memorial that has a very tall Jefferson inside. Originally, when it was made, they actually just had a plaster cast of Jefferson in there because they didn't have the money for the metal at the time, but now that has been completed for quite some time now. You can actually stand at the columns, at the middle column of the Jefferson Memorial, and look across and see the White House from there, because the trees had been cut down so that the president at the time of Jefferson Memorial being built could look across and watch it being built. This is the Holocaust Museum. You can go into a couple portions of the museum without having a timed ticket. The tickets are free, but oftentimes this is a very, very popular destination. So in busy tourist season, oftentimes you need to apply ahead. So 3 months to the day before you plan on going, if you want to ensure that you get a ticket to the entire museum, you need to go online and set yourself up for getting a ticket. So make sure you do that, because it's definitely worth it. I believe if you set it up 3 months in advance as a family, it costs $1 per ticket. You can check in at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock in the morning whenever it opens to try to see if there's any tickets left available for that day. Next, you can go to the Washington Monument. You can actually go up up in the Washington Monument. You can see there at the 500-foot mark, I took a picture. It's actually 555 feet and a little bit more tall. And these pictures of the Capitol building and Lincoln Memorial are taken from the little windows at the top of the Washington Monument. The monument has been closed more in the last 5 years than it's been open, actually. It sustained a lot of damage during the earthquake, which I believe was in August of 2011. And so it was closed down so they could make the necessary repairs to that. It opened for a brief period of time when they realized that they really needed to kind of do a complete overhaul, so it was closed for another few years and has just recently opened back up within the last year. So I would recommend getting a ticket for early in the day. You can do this through the recreation.gov website. You can there's a link from just typing in Washington Monument tickets. There's a link to help you get to that. I would recommend a time earlier in the day. At least in the past, it seemed like the later in the day it went, the further they got behind on the ticket time, so you were standing in line waiting for a while. With the new renovations, it's possible that that will go quicker, but I still recommend, at least until we know for sure, to try for an early in the day ticket time. Next is the World War II Memorial. It's kind of located between the Washington Monument and the Lincoln Memorial and Reflecting Pool. It wasn't completed until 2004, which is kind of surprising considering how many Americans participated in the war efforts, including people at home, making victory gardens, working the farms that they normally wouldn't work, having factory jobs that they might not normally have. Everyone seemed to be touched in some way during the war. If you had a family member serving in the war, you had a blue star in your window. And unfortunately, if the person in your family passed away, then you put a gold star in the window. It was a way that everyone could know. Didn't have social media back then to post those sorts of things, so it was a subtle way to let people know what was going on with your family. So part of this memorial are gold stars, and each gold star represents 100 Americans whose lives were lost during World War II. There are over 4,000 stars on that wall. It's a really, really beautiful memorial with the large pillars being on each side representing the two theaters, the Pacific and the Atlantic, the two oceans over which this war was fought, being a world war. And then each state or territory that was at that time has its own pillar with name on it as well. And then there's a wreath of wheat and a wreath of oak on each of those sides. So if you walk the whole 3.5-mile route and give yourself, 20 to 30 minutes at each of those stops, you could probably complete this whole circuit in 6 to 8 hours. If you want to stop for a meal or a picnic, there are a few little spots to get things or street vendors. Take a bottled water with you depending on the time of year that you go. But you could cover all of that territory. So if you start early in the day, you could be done by early afternoon with this portion. And then you have some options. You can either head across the Potomac River and spend an afternoon at Arlington National Cemetery. You could drive even further and get yourself to George Washington's Mount Vernon. Or you could just continue down the National Mall and hit some Smithsonian museums. So in the next episode, those are some of the things that we'll talk about. As you can see, there are some spots just across the river that you will definitely want to make sure that you hit. You can take the metro across. It does go under the river, so you can take the train from over on the other side and get yourself either to Pentagon City Mall has a stop, the Pentagon has a stop, the National Cemetery has a stop, so plenty of ways for you to get yourself over there. Arlington National Cemetery does have a parking lot as well that you can pay to park, and we'll talk more about these sites in episode 16. Thanks. See you next time.